Welcome friends, now let us focus on your place of supply for services, where both the location of your supplier as well as location of your recipient, both location of your supplier as well as location of your recipient is in India. So both are in India, both location of supplier as well as location of recipient is in India. If anyone is outside India or both are outside India, then friends you have to see section 13, but when you are talking about section 12, both location of supplier as well as location of recipient is in India. Now friends, when you are talking about your section 12, we have to bifurcate your section 12 into two parts, where you are talking about location of supplier as well as location of recipient in India. We have to bifurcate them into two parts. First part being where place of supply is based on registration status, which means the answer will be based on registration of the recipient. Where place of supply is not based on registration status, not based on registration status. Now we have to understand that our bifurcation of our section 12 is in two parts, based on registration of the recipient, not based on registration of the recipient. So the subsection numbers will not be in sequence. You will not find the subsection numbers in sequence. Now let us focus on the first category here. The first category that we are discussing is general rule, section 12 subsection 2, general. When I talk about general, understand friends, if at all it is not covered anywhere, if at all it is not covered anywhere, only then you are going to see this general rule, which means if at all it is specifically covered in section 12 other parts, you have, this is the first provision in terms of your section 12 subsection 2. This is general provision. If your service is covered by any of the other specific categories, then you are not going to see this general provision. You are talking about this particular general rule where our focus is on all services other than mentioned in section 12.3 to 12.14, which means if a particular service is mentioned in section 12 subsection 3 to section 12 subsection 14, please do not come and touch section 12 subsection 2. When are you going to touch section 12 subsection 2? When you scan entire section 12, right, starting from section 12 subsection 3 to section 12 subsection 14, and you don't find your service, only then you will come and see the general provision section 12 subsection 2. Now what it is telling? It is telling that if at all a supply is to a registered person, then location of such registered person, then the place of supply is location of such registered person. And friends, if the supply is to unregistered person, then it depends. If the address of the recipient is on records, location of recipient. If the address of the recipient is not on records, location of supplier. So the prima facie answer in all the initial cases where I said your place of supply is based on registration status. Why we have categorized into two? When I said that the first part of this place of supply is a scenario where your place of supply is based on registration status, the first priority, the moment your recipient is registered, the answer is very simple. Location of such registered person, location of such registered recipient. If your recipient is not registered, then it depends. The answer will vary. In this general scenario, if your recipient is registered, answer is very simple. Your place of supply is location of such registered recipient. If he is not registered, then see, if you have his address on records, I am the supplier, you guys are the recipient. If you guys are registered, it is location of registered recipient. If the recipients are not registered, if at all I have your address on my records as a supplier, then I'll go with location of recipient. But if I don't have address on my records, then it is location of supplier, my own location of supplier. Now let us see this with the help of example. All these place of supplies we are going to see with the help of small conceptual examples. Mr. D.K. CA of Tamil Nadu, this supplier, provides a legal opinion to Mr. V.K. of Madhya Pradesh. Supplier is D.K. of Tamil Nadu, a chartered accountant of Tamil Nadu, is providing legal services. Legal services not covered anywhere in section 12 subsection 3 to section 12 subsection 14. So it is going to come in the general category. He is providing legal services to Mr. V.K. of Madhya Pradesh. Now, who is the recipient? Mr. V.K. If V.K. is registered person, answer is location of such registered person, which means answer is Madhya Pradesh, because VK is in recipient is in Madhya Pradesh. So here the supplier is DK and recipient is Mr. VK. Now, if VK is registered, location of such registered recipient, which means Madhya Pradesh. If VK is not registered, if VK is not registered person, unregistered person, if the address of recipient, that is VK, exists on the records of supplier, that is Mr. DK. If address is there on records, then the answer is again location of recipient, that is Madhya Pradesh. If address is not there on records, then the answer is location of supplier. And where is supplier located, friends? Tamil Nadu. Location of supplier is Tamil Nadu. So that is how you have to see your section 12 subsection 2, which is a general provision. It will be applicable if your service is not covered anywhere in section 12 subsection 3 to section 12 subsection 14. And one very important point, you are going to touch your section 12 only if both location of supplier as well as location of recipient is in India. So that is a very, very important point. If anyone is outside India, then please see section 13. Next, you are talking about section 12 subsection 5. Section 12 subsection 5. Now, which service are you talking about? You are talking about training, service in relation to training and performance appraisal. If you see the QR infographics, you will clearly find that. You are talking about training and performance appraisal, which means it is a performance based service, but specifically it is talking about a specific performance service, training and performance appraisal. If the service is that of training, if I go and act as a trainer for a company in respect to GST and customs related matter, that is covered. So you are talking about a trainer, training and performance appraisal services. In that scenario, friends, if supply is to registered person, the answer is quite simple. Registered recipient means answer is quite simple. Place of supply is equal to location of such registered recipient. If the recipient is unregistered, then place of supply is equal to location where such services are actually performed. That is performance place, a place where the service or training or performance appraisal is done. Performance based services, location of performance. So location where such services are actually performed means the location of that performance or that training. But interesting point to notice, law is silent if performance is in multiple places. Law is silent about it. Normally, if the answer is multiple states or union territories, how to bifurcate it? We have IGST rules. We are going to see those IGST rules. But unfortunately, when you talk about your section 12 subsection 5, which talks about training and performance appraisal services, in that scenario, if the supply is to registered person, it is location of such registered person. If the supply is to unregistered person, if the supply happens to be to unregistered person, then they tell that location where such services are actually performed. It may happen that I am taking training to a particular recipient in 2 different locations. I go to one location, train them, I go to another location, train them. So if the answer is in multiple states, if the place of performance is multiple states or union territories, law is silent about it. There is no answer in the law. Right. So generally when you have multiple states or union territories as the answer, how to freeze the answer, we have rules. But for this we don't have rules. Unfortunately, we do not have rules. Now let us see this with the help of example. Now what is the example given here? Mr. DK of Tamil Nadu, supplier, trains the employees of Mr. VK of Madhya Pradesh in soft skills, called soft skill trainer, right? Communication, how to communicate about your body language, etc., etc. So Mr. DK of Tamil Nadu, who is the supplier, is giving training to employees of Mr. VK of MP. VK of MP is the recipient. Now supplier is DK Tamil Nadu, recipient is VK Madhya Pradesh. More or less we have kept these points same so that you can easily understand that. Now friends, if you talk about recipient is Mr. VK. If recipient is registered person, if Mr. VK is registered, recipient is Mr. VK is registered person, and you are talking about the training is taking place at let us assume that the training is taking place at Tamil Nadu or at Goa, at Maldives. So we are taking 2-3 different situations. The training is taking place at Tamil Nadu, or training is taking place at Goa, or training is taking place as Maldives. Right? VK is unregistered, training is taking place at Tamil Nadu, at Goa, at Maldives. Friends, understand that if Mr. VK is registered, whether the training takes place at Tamil Nadu or Goa or Maldives outside India, understand that understand that your place of supply is location of such registered recipient, that is Madhya Pradesh. So if the recipient is registered, you need not see anything else. Where the training is actually taking place or where there is actual performance, forget about it. If the recipient is registered, then the place of supply is location of such registered recipient, which means in this example it is Madhya Pradesh. Whether the training takes place at Tamil Nadu or Goa or Maldives, it does not make a difference. But if the recipient is unregistered, if I tell the recipient Mr. VK in Madhya Pradesh is not registered, in that scenario, if the training takes place in Tamil Nadu, place of supply is Tamil Nadu. If the training takes place in Goa, place of supply is Goa. If the training takes place in Maldives, place of supply is Maldives. If the training takes place in Tamil Nadu, answer is Tamil Nadu. If the training takes place in Goa, answer is Goa. If the training takes place in Maldives, answer is Maldives. And understand friends, all these are separate cases. They are not together cases or. All these are separate cases. As I clearly said, if such services are provided to unregistered person and if at all training is taking place as two places for the same contract, then law is silent about it. So when I am talking about training taking place at Tamil Nadu, it is only at Tamil Nadu, answer is Tamil Nadu. Training is taking place at Goa, it is only at Goa, answer is Goa if the recipient is unregistered. If the training is taking place at Maldives and training is only at Maldives, then if the recipient is unregistered, the place of supply is Maldives, where it is actually performed. But if recipient was registered, if Mr. VK of Madhya Pradesh is registered, place of supply is Madhya Pradesh, irrespective of where the actual training takes place. So that is section 12, subsection 5, where you are talking about training and performance appraisal services. Now friends, we are talking about your section 12, subsection 7, read along with rule 5. We are going to see one of the rule 5. Rule 5 of which rules? IGST rules. Rule 5 of IGST rules 2017. Now friends, the section 12, subsection 7 talks about what? It talks about organization of an event, any event. It can be educational event or entertainment event or sporting event or scientific event or cultural event, etc. Any event, organization of event and its ancillary services. Which type of event? Any type of event. And assigning sponsorship to such events. Basically, the focus is on organization of events and the related or ancillary services, including sponsorship for that particular event. So focus is on event. Which type of event? Any type of event. That event can be educational or scientific or cultural or you are talking about artistic event or you are talking about a sporting event, any type of event, any type, conference, trade fairs, etc. Any type of event is there. Related ancillary services plus sponsorship related to such events even is covered here. Now in such a scenario friends, what are they trying to tell? The answer is quite simple. If the recipient is registered, answer is very simple. Location of such registered recipient. If the recipient is not registered, unregistered, then if the events is taking place in India, in that scenario, location of event, place where the event is held, location of event. And if the event is taking place outside India, then the answer is location of recipient. If it is in India, location of event. If it is outside India, location of recipient. If it is in India, so friends, understand that if the recipient is registered, answer is quite simple. It is location of such registered recipient. If the recipient is not registered, then you have to evaluate. Then you have to further evaluate. If the event is in India, answer is location of event. If the event is outside India, answer is not location of event, answer is location of recipient. Here we focus on event, here you focus on recipient. But a very important point, when the event is in India, it is highly possible that place of supply is in multiple states. If the event is in India, the answer is place of supply is location of the event. If the event takes place in multiple states or union territory, you have to refer to Rule 5. Now, what is Rule 5 talking about? Rule 5 of IGST rules. Rule 5 is telling that if place of supply by application of Rule 5, if place of supply as per section 12 subsection 7 is multiple states or union territory, if you get a place of supply in multiple states union territory for what? For organization of an event or ancillary services, including assigning the sponsorship to that event, then place of supply each of that state or union territory in proportion to the value as per contract. In proportion to the value as per contract. So you have to go by contract. They will tell that for this state this is the value that we are going to give. If for this state this is the value. For organization of an event, say IPL event is organized in 2 different states, one in Maharashtra and one in say West Bengal. Now it should be very clearly mentioned in the contract that for organization of IPL event at Maharashtra, so and so is the value. Say 90 crores is the value. For organization of the same IPL event a few days in West Bengal, 30 crores is the value. So it is as per the contract value in the contract, 90 crores and 30 crores respectively. But if at all contract is silent about bifurcation, then you have to apply generally accepted accounting principles. So you have to go as per contract bifurcation. If at all event is taking place in multiple states, recipient is registered means no problem. Recipient is unregistered and event is taking place at multiple states or union territory. Answer is each of the state of or union territory. But in which ratio it will be divided? In which ratio your value will be divided? Now place of supply, I will have Maharashtra as well as West Bengal. Now in which ratio your value will be divided? Because for the same contract you have 2 answers. You will be dividing the value on the basis of contract. If contract is silent about the valuation part of event in one state and event in other state, if it is silent, then you have to go with generally accepted accounting principles. Now let us see this example. Supposing Mr. A charges 10 lakhs for organizing 3 events in state 1 and 2 events in state 2. Totally 5 events are there. For total 5 events, he is charging 10 lakhs. For totally 5 events, he is charging 10 lakhs. He is telling that 3 events will be there in state 1 and he has to perform in 2 events in state 2. Now, if at all, if the value as per contract is bifurcated for both these states, no issues. If contract is very clear that say 7 lakhs is for state 1 and 3 lakhs is for state 2, go with 7 lakhs, 3 lakhs. But if contract is not clear, then you have to go with generally accepted accounting principles, in which in this scenario will be 10 lakhs for 5 events, 3 in state 1 and 2 in state 2. So the ratio will be 3:2. So value will be apportioned in 3:2 ratio, which means 6 lakhs will be apportioned to state 1 and 4 lakhs will be apportioned to state 2. Right, that is all about your rule 5. Rule 5. When you get multiple states or union territory as the answer by application of section 12 subsection 7, where you are talking about organization of any type of event including ancillary services, including assigning of sponsorship to that events, in a scenario where the supply is made to unregistered recipient, where place of supply is location of event if the events are in India. If the events are outside India, location of recipient. If the events are in India, it is location of event. Now if events takes place in multiple states, please follow rule 5. Rule 5 tells that go and bifurcate the value as per contract. If contract is silent, go with generally accepted accounting principle for bifurcating the value. Now friends, let us see the example for this. Now what is the example given here? Now example for section 12 subsection 7. Mr. DK of Tamil Nadu organizes an event for Mr. VK of Madhya Pradesh. Organizes an event for Mr. VK of Madhya Pradesh. Again friends, it is pretty clear that DK is the supplier and VK is the recipient. Now assume that if VK is registered, VK is not registered, two separate cases. VK is registered, VK is not registered. Friends, if VK is registered, whether the event takes place at Tamil Nadu, Goa or Maldives, if VK is registered, whether the event takes place in India or outside India, the place of supply is location of such registered recipient, that is a location of Mr. VK, Madhya Pradesh. So if VK is registered recipient, place of supply is location of such registered recipient, Madhya Pradesh. Whether the event takes place in Tamil Nadu, Goa or Maldives is not at all important. But if VK is not registered, if the recipient is not registered, if the event takes place in Tamil Nadu, then the answer is Tamil Nadu. If the event takes place in Goa, then the answer is Goa. If the event takes place outside India, Maldives, then the answer is not Maldives, friends. Then the answer is location of recipient. Location of recipient, Madhya Pradesh. A very important point. See, if Such services are provided to registered recipient irrespective of where the event is taking place. Place of supply is location of such registered recipient. So whether the event takes place in Tamil Nadu or Goa or Maldives, answer is Madhya Pradesh. If the supply is to unregistered person, which means recipient is unregistered, then for the events taking place in India, if the event is taking place in Tamil Nadu, answer is Tamil Nadu. If the event is taking place in Goa, answer is Goa. That is location of event, location where the event is conducted. But if the event is if the recipient is unregistered person plus event is outside India, then place of supply is location of recipient. It is Madhya Pradesh, friends. It is not Maldives. It is Madhya Pradesh, friends. It is not Maldives. Please compare this with your section 12 subsection 5 where you are talking about training and performance appraisal services, where the answer would have been Maldives. That was training and performance appraisal services. This is organization of an event including ancillary services, also including assigning of sponsorship services to that event. Right. So this is all about your section 12 subsection 7 read along with your rule 5. Now next, friends, you are talking about section 12 subsection 8. You are talking about transportation of goods transportation service. Goods transportation service. If at all, when you talk about goods transportation service, if the goods are going outside India, which means it is export of goods. If the goods are going outside India means export of goods, then you have to focus on destination of goods. So place of supply is destination of goods. Place of supply is destination of goods. For transportation of goods other than exports, for transportation of goods resulting in exports, place of supply for transportation services, destination of goods. For transportation of goods not for export, that is within India, then if the supply is to registered person, it is location of such registered recipient. If the supply is to unregistered person, then very important point, where the goods are handed over for transportation. Place of supply is where the goods are given, origin. Where the goods are handed over for transportation means the focus is on origin. The focus is on origin. The entire focus is on origin. So here, friends, you have a special bifurcation. Transportation of goods service resulting into export of goods means place of supply is destination of goods. Transportation of goods services within India not resulting into export. Then if the recipient is registered, then the place of supply is location of such registered recipient. If the recipient is not registered, then friends, the place of supply is the location where the goods are handed over for transportation means origin. Now let us see the example for this. Let us see the example. You are talking about a scenario where Mr. DK of Tamil Nadu gives goods to Goods Transportation Agency of Tamil Nadu for delivery to Mr. VK. Friends, understand that supplier now is GTA. Now recipient Mr. DK is consignor. Mr. DK is consignor and Mr. VK is consignee. Any one of them will be the recipient, not both. Supplier is clearly GTA. And here please understand that DK is consignor is in Tamil Nadu, consignee is in Madhya Pradesh. Consignee Mr. VK is in Madhya Pradesh, but supplier, friends, is not DK or VK. Supplier here is GTA. Now, if at all you are talking about a scenario where the goods are going outside India for export, if at all you are talking about a situation where the goods are going for exportation, the goods are transported for exportation, that is the consignee Mr. VK is in Nepal, then if transportation services for exportation of goods, then place of supply for such transportation services, destination of goods is Nepal. Destination of goods, friends, is Nepal. Right. And now a very important question comes that who is the recipient, whether consignor is the recipient or consignee is the recipient. It depends. If VK pays freight, if VK is liable to pay the freight, VK is the recipient. If the freight needs to be paid by DK, if the freight needs to be paid by DK, if the consignee has to pay the freight, consignee is the recipient. If the freight has to be paid by the DK, if consignor has to pay the freight, then who is the recipient? Recipient is consignor. So, consignor or consignee may be the recipient. Based on who is liable to pay the transportation charges to GTA, they are the recipient. If VK is liable to pay the freight to the GTA, then VK is the recipient. If DK is liable to pay the freight to the GTA, then DK is the recipient. Now, assume that if you are talking about VK is liable to pay the freight, VK is liable to pay the freight, then friends, in this situation, please further analyze. If VK is registered recipient, if VK is registered recipient, maybe consignor, maybe consignee, it depends who is liable to pay the freight. So, we are talking about consignor liable to pay freight, DK is the recipient. If consignee is liable to pay freight, consignee VK is the recipient. Assume that VK is liable to pay freight, consignee is the recipient, and the recipient is registered person. If the recipient is registered person for the movements of goods within India, the place of supply is location of such registered recipient, VK is located in Madhya Pradesh. If the recipient is unregistered person, if recipient VK, how to decide who is the recipient? Based on who is liable to pay freight, he is the recipient. In this first situation, we have understood, we have assumed that VK is liable to pay freight. So, if VK is unregistered recipient, then place of supply is the location where the goods are handed over for transportation. The goods are handed over for transportation at Tamil Nadu. The origin of goods is Tamil Nadu. The goods are handed over for transportation in Tamil Nadu. The origin of goods is in Tamil Nadu. Now, friends, if I tell that DK is liable to pay freight, DK, consignor is liable to pay freight, DK is liable to pay freight, consignor is liable to pay freight, then it is consignor is the recipient. If consignor is liable to pay freight, consignor is the recipient. If consignee is liable to pay freight, consignee is the recipient. In the second case, we are assuming that consignor, that is DK, is liable to pay the freight, then DK is the recipient. Now, you have to ask a question whether DK is registered recipient. If DK is registered recipient for the goods transportation within India, then for registered recipient, the answer is location of such registered recipient, and DK, the consignor, is located in Tamil Nadu. If DK, the consignor, is unregistered person, if DK consignor is unregistered person, then place of supply for transportation of services other than for export of goods where the recipient is unregistered person is location where the goods are handed over for transportation. The goods were handed over for transportation at Tamil Nadu. The goods were handed over for transportation at Tamil Nadu. Right. So, this is all about your section 12 subsection 8 where you are talking about transportation of goods services. Here there was a very important and interesting point where you are talking about transportation service in relation to export of goods. Transportation services that of transportation, but in relation to export of goods. The goods are going from India to USA and the focus is on transportation services. Here they tell that place of supply is equal to there you don't see who's the recipient, whether registered or unregistered, you forget about that. Place of supply is destination of goods. Destination of goods, friends, is USA. In our example, we took Nepal. In our example that we had, we took Nepal. So, here is either USA or Nepal, as the case may be. But friends, understand that though the place of supply is USA or Nepal, it is not export of services. Why it is not export of services? I will point out the reason. Location of supplier is in India. Location of recipient should be outside India. For export, location of supplier, location of supplier should be in India, location of recipient should be outside India, place of supply should be outside India. You have to get foreign currency. Normally Indian rupees is only when permitted by RBI, plus You should not be establishments of distinct persons. You should not be branch offices of the same company. So for export of services, you do have 5 conditions. You do have 5 conditions. Now when you see this scenario, location of supplier is in India, yes. Supplier transporter is in India. Place of supply is outside India, yes. Place of supply is destination of goods, place of supply is destination of goods, in our example USA or Nepal as the case may be. But location of recipient is not outside India. Location of recipient is not outside India. Recipient is in India. Only if both supplier and recipient are in India, only then you apply section 12. So recipient is in India, therefore out of 5 conditions, second condition is not satisfied, so it cannot be called as export of services. When it cannot be called as export of services, what tax it will have? It will have which tax? Here location of supplier is India and place of supply is USA or Nepal. You will have IGST tax. But as it is not export of services, 0 rating will not be applied. You will have IGST tax. Tax, but as it is not export of services. Why it is not export of services? Out of 5 condition of export of services, the second condition is location of the recipient should be outside India. But in this scenario, recipient is there in India. Both supplier and recipient are in India. Therefore, it cannot be export of services. 0 rating will not be there. So supplier in India, place of supply outside India, it will be IGST transaction, but not export of services. So this point was an important point for you to understand. Next friends, you are talking about section 12 subsection 9, passenger transportation services. Section 12 subsection 9, you are talking about passenger transportation services. Now if passenger transportation service is given to registered person, if the recipient is registered person, location of such registered recipient. If the recipient is unregistered person, then friends you have to evaluate if point of embarkation is known at the time of supply. Normal scenario, if you know the point of embarkation where you are going to start your journey at the time of supply, when you are making the payment, then it is place of embarkation for continuous journey, when you enter that conveyance for continuous journey. If point of embarkation is not known at the time of supply, which means you are talking about pass, travel pass, right to passage, you are talking about travel pass. Using that travel pass, you can keep on traveling. Today you will travel, tomorrow you will travel, maybe 3 days you will not travel, thereafter 5th day you will travel, 6th day you will travel, another 3 days you will not travel, then 10th day you will travel, another 5 days you will not travel, etc, etc. Right to passage. You pay amount in advance, you get a pass, travel pass. It is there for bus very commonly, for trains is also there very commonly, and even when you are a regular traveler in flight, they give you right to passage. Yearly you can pay an amount and you can travel in flight at certain origins and destinations, say 20 times a year. So you are talking about right to passage. You don't know, you are making the payment in advance, but you don't know you are going to use this payment for which all travels. You will be using it for multiple travels. In that scenario, if the address of the recipient is on records, then location of recipient. If the address of the recipient is not on records, then location of supplier. Now let us try to understand this with the help of an example. If Mr. DK of Tamil Nadu, in all the cases DKs of Tamil Nadu is supplying the services, rather he is the recipient now, Mr. DK of Tamil Nadu pays 50,000 to Indigo of Madhya Pradesh for passenger transportation service. Now friends, Indigo of Madhya Pradesh is the supplier, a very important point. Indigo of Madhya Pradesh is the supplier, recipient is Mr. DK. So here you have to be very careful when you are fixing. In all the examples, first we have fixed who is the supplier, who is the recipient, only then we have seen the examples. So it is a passenger transportation services, but the supplier is Indigo and the recipient is DK of Tamil Nadu. If I tell DK is registered, then you need not think of anything else. You need not even analyze what it is. Then place of supply is location of registered recipient, that is Tamil Nadu. The issue is when DK is not registered. The issue is only when DK is not registered. DK is not registered. If DK is not registered and it is right to passage. Right to passage means you are talking about travel pass. Right to passage, friends, means you are talking about travel pass. travel pass. You are using a pass for traveling continuously. You will be paying once in a month or once in 6 months or once in 1 year, and you will be regularly frequently using it for your travel pass, right to passage. If address of the recipient is on records, if address of the recipient is on records, then it is location of recipient is DK Tamil Nadu. If address of recipient is not on records, then it is location of supplier is Indigo is there in Madhya Pradesh. If the recipient is unregistered and you are talking about a normal situation. Normal situation means you are paying now and traveling now. Pay and travel. Pay now, travel now. No right to passage. Pay now, travel now. Then friends, the answer is place where the passenger embarks the conveyance for continuous journey. If DK is entering that conveyance, at Tamil Nadu, place of supply is Tamil Nadu. If DK is entering that conveyance at Uttar Pradesh, place of supply is Uttar Pradesh. If DK is entering that conveyance at Maharashtra, place of supply is Maharashtra. If DK is entering that conveyance at West Bengal is the answer. See friends, this is bifurcated into 3 parts. If the recipient is registered, no issues. It is location of registered recipient, you need not evaluate it further. If the recipient is not registered and if it is a special scenario, travel pass, then if address is on records, then location of recipient. If address is not on records, location of supplier. And if it is a very regular case, recipient is unregistered, recipient DK is unregistered, plus it is a normal travel, pay now, travel now, then it is place where the passenger embarks the conveyance for continuous journey, which means where the passenger is entering the conveyance for continuous journey. If DK enters that conveyance at Tamil Nadu, place of supply is Tamil Nadu. If DK enters that conveyance in Uttar Pradesh, place of supply is Uttar Pradesh. If DK enters that conveyance at Maharashtra, place of supply is Maharashtra. If DK enters that conveyance in Madhya Pradesh, place of supply is Madhya Pradesh, etc., etc., etc. Now, here if you see in a situation where the recipient is unregistered and it is a normal case, place of supply is place where the passenger embarks the conveyance for continuous journey. What is meant by continuous journey? Continuous journey means there is no stopover. There is no stopover between 2 legs of the journey, and these when you are talking about there is no stopover, you could have purchased those tickets against a single invoice. You are going through that journey either against a single invoice or multiple invoices issued by a single supplier or agent representing the multiple suppliers. So continuous journey means there is no stopover between legs of journey. There is no stopover. We are not stopping anywhere. Now I may go from Goa to Delhi via Kolkata. I have some work in Kolkata. Goa to Delhi via Kolkata. If I go from Goa to Kolkata, take a halt, then there is a stopover. Then Kolkata to Delhi, again there is a 2 supplies. But if I go, there is a flight available to Delhi but only via Kolkata, I don't have any work, I don't have any stopover. From the Goa I go to Kolkata, I don't get down there. From Kolkata the flight goes to your Delhi. Now understand that there is actually stopover as regard as the plane is considered, but for the passenger there is no stopover. I don't get down there and I don't take a break. I don't take a break from journey. Now I may have single ticket or multiple tickets. For Goa to Delhi via Kolkata, I may have single ticket or multiple tickets. Single ticket means it is a chain ticket, or multiple tickets issued by the same supplier or agent representing multiple suppliers. Either I should have taken, if it is single ticket, no problem. If it is multiple tickets, there is condition. Either I should have taken from the same supplier, same Indigo flight, or through the agent of multiple suppliers. The part of the flight will be of say Indigo, and the other part of flight is Air India. From Goa to Kolkata it may be Indigo. From Kolkata to Delhi it may be Air India. No worries. As long as you are not having any stopover, you are not getting down, it is considered as continuous journey. Simple point is there should be no stopover from the point of view of passenger between the legs of the journey. He should not take a break. Passenger should not take a break. Plus, if it is a single ticket, very neat and clean, simple. If it is multiple ticket, those multiple tickets should be taken either from the same supplier, that is Indigo, Goa to Kolkata, Kolkata to Delhi, same supplier Indigo, or Goa to Kolkata, Indigo, Kolkata to Delhi, it is Air India, but there are multiple suppliers, but you are taking the tickets to same agent. So there is no stopover for the passengers between two legs of journey, where either there is only a single ticket, or even if multiple ticket is there, no issues. But if the multiple ticket should be issued either by the same supplier, in our example Indigo, or agent representing multiple suppliers. So if I am going into two airlines, then I should have taken the tickets from a common agent for both the suppliers, from a single agent representing both the suppliers. Now friends, what is meant by stopover? Stopover is from the angle of passenger. So when the flight is going from Goa to Delhi via Kolkata, there is a stopover for the flight but not for the passenger. He is not taking a break. So stopover means disembarking the conveyance for changing the conveyance or to break the journey to resume at a later point of time. If passenger is breaking the journey and continuing at a later point of time, then there is a stopover. Now stopover should be seen from the angle of passenger. If passenger is going at Kolkata, taking a halt for 1 day or 2 days for doing some work, then from Kolkata is going to Delhi, then there are two supplies. Supply of transportation of passengers from Goa to Delhi, one, then from Goa to Kolkata, one, then from Kolkata to Delhi, second. So if I am talking about this situation, understand that if at all you are talking about Goa to Delhi via Kolkata, from the angle of passenger, there should be no stopover. From the angle of passenger, there should be no stopover. Now if there is no stopover, friends, understand that there is only one supply. Assuming that even if it is multiple tickets, it is from the same supplier or agent representing multiple suppliers. If there is stopover, there are two supplies. Now if there is no stopover, friends, we are talking about a situation where recipient is unregistered, plus you are talking about normal travel. Normal travel means you are talking about a situation where you are not talking about right to passage, you are not talking about travel pass. Pay now, travel now. Now if at all you are talking about no stopover, Goa to Kolkata to Delhi, the flight is stopping there, and after some time it will again go to Delhi, or you may get down from Indigo flight and you may again get inside Air India, but you have taken multiple tickets from the same agent representing the multiple suppliers. In such a scenario, there is only one supply. Place of supply is equal to where the passenger embarks the conveyance for continuous journey. Which is equal to Goa. If at all you are talking about stopover, if at all there is stopover, again place of supply is very simple. Because the recipient is unregistered and it is a normal travel, place of supply is where the passenger embarks the conveyance for continuous journey. Now place of supply for the first part of the journey, Goa to Kolkata, will be Goa, and place of supply for the second part of the journey, Kolkata to Delhi, will be Kolkata. There will be two answers. So if at all there is no stopover, then there is only one answer, Goa. If at all there is a stopover, which means passenger is taking a break and then resuming his journey. He is taking a break and is resuming the journey. Then friends, place of supply for the first part, there are two supplies. Then for the first part it is Goa to Kolkata, it is Goa. Kolkata to Delhi, the place of supply for the second supply is Kolkata. Right. So this is all about your section 12 subsection 9. Now friends, we are talking about section 12 subsection 13, your insurance services. Insurance services. When you talk about insurance services, if the supply is to registered person. Again, location of such registered recipient. If the supply is to unregistered recipient, location of recipient on records. Again, the answer is location of recipient on records, because understand that whenever you are taking insurance, your address will be on records for sure. If at all you are taking an insurance, the address of the recipient will surely be on the records of the insurance company. So for insurance services, anyhow the answer will be location of recipient. If the recipient is registered, location of such registered recipient. If the recipient is not registered, location of recipient as per the records of the supplier. So records will surely contain, for insurance company, records will surely contain the address of the recipient, surely. So there is no alternative. There is no alternative. Now let us see the example. Let us see the example. Mr. VK, registered person of Tamil Nadu, buys a stock insurance policy. Now, which insurance are you talking about? Any insurance, general insurance or life insurance? When you talk about insurance services here, friends, understand that you are talking about any insurance, general insurance or life insurance, both are covered. So, if at all you are talking about Mr. VK, a registered person of Tamil Nadu, buys a stock insurance policy. Now, friends, understand that who is the recipient? Recipient here is Mr. VK of Tamil Nadu. Place of supply will be location of registered recipient, that is Tamil Nadu. Another example. Mr. A, working in Tamil Nadu, not registered, he is working in Tamil Nadu, buys LIC policy. One is the example of general insurance, one is the example of life insurance, and one is the example where recipient is registered, one is the example where recipient is not registered. So Mr. A who is working in Tamil Nadu buys an LIC policy. If nothing is mentioned, it means that he is not registered. He has given his residential address. Now friends, here recipient is Mr. A and this recipient is not unregistered. In the earlier example, recipient was Mr. VK and he was registered. Now recipient now is unregistered person. Recipient is unregistered person. Now place of supply for insurance services where recipient is not registered is location of recipient on records. What is the recipient? What is the location of recipient on records? For insurance purposes, Mr. A has given his residential address of Madhya Pradesh. See, Mr. A is working in Tamil Nadu, but while taking insurance policy, he has given his residential address of Madhya Pradesh. Very common practice. He has given his residential address of Madhya Pradesh. So, if the recipient is not registered, though Mr. A, the recipient is not registered and is working in Tamil Nadu, at the time of taking insurance policy, what address he has given? He has given his residential address, ancestral address of Madhya Pradesh. So, place of supply will be location of recipients as per the records of the insurance company, which is Madhya Pradesh and not Tamil Nadu. Which is Madhya Pradesh and not Tamil Nadu. Friends, this completes our first part of section 12, where we are focusing on both location of supplier and location of recipient are in India, and the answers are based on registration status of the recipient. If you look at it carefully, we have seen the general provision section 12 subsection 2, then certain specific provision section 12 subsection 5 when you are talking about training and performance appraisal, section 12 subsection 7 when you are talking about events, right? Section 12 subsection 8 goods transportation, section 12 subsection 9 passenger transportation, and section 12 subsection 13 insurance services, whether life insurance or general insurance. You will find that we have not discussed section 12 subsection 4, 3, section 12 subsection 4, section 12 subsection 6, section 12 subsection 10, 11 and 12, because in all these cases place of supply is not based on the registration status of the recipient. So this completes our first part of section 12, where place of supply is primarily based on the registration status of the recipient.